Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. Hopefully this will all work. So just to give you a little bit of background, Coundon Court is a very large secondary school in Coventry. So in terms of our cohort, we're a 12 form entry for primary school teachers to understand the sort of size of our school. So we're just pushing 1,800 children now from year 7 to 11 and a sixth form. So as you can probably imagine, with a large staff body, this was something that really was something we needed to recognise with regards to bullying and recognising what had almost become a little bit of normalised behaviour with some of our students who thought that it was okay to have what they would recognise as banter, which actually is completely unacceptable. And we know that the core root of that was actually getting staff to understand and recognise and challenge students when things were going wrong, or when this banter, or whatever you want to call it, had first started. So it had come from a mixture of places really, as what was the actual initial need for that. First of all, it was through our student voice. So students were talking a lot about, so we've got anti-bullying ambassadors ourselves, and through that student voice sort of platform, students were sharing that this was becoming more common and, as I say, more normalised. So it was a real push for us to get to understand and almost unpick what we needed to do first. Obviously, we have some new legislation with regards to the Keeping Children Safe in Education document, and with that, obviously, that understanding of peer-on-peer or child-on-child abuse. And staff voice actually also showed that staff weren't really confident in either challenging the behaviour, but also knowing how to record it. So we didn't even really, at the start, didn't really know how common this was, other than from what the students were saying. So our initial starting point was, I don't know if I need someone to just click the next slide. It's not working for me, sorry. So the first part was then to obviously make sure that we could improve that staff awareness of child-on-child abuse, make sure that staff knew how to record this and recording it correctly, so that we could actually then understand where the level of need was for individuals that needed additional support, so that they could recognise that what they were doing in their behaviour was unacceptable, but also to be able to deal with that classroom practice across our whole school and make sure that our approach was consistent. As I say, with a large secondary school, we needed that consistent approach. So that was obviously the start of what we needed to do. So if we can just move on to the next slide, please. So what we then did was we started with, after the initial starting point was to deliver some whole school training. But whole school training couldn't just be a one-off session where staff would come into the hall after, a bit like all of ourselves today, after a long day teaching, and think that everything was going to be okay after a one-off session. We knew that this was going to need to happen during the course of the year and continue. So the staff training started that off and kick-started it, but then there was regular training throughout our pastoral teams, but also through whole school CPD, to make sure that not only we were refreshing what our expectations were, but also to make sure that any new staff, or staff that had not been on further training or whatever else, that everybody can continue to understand what our expectations were, and making sure that everybody was consistent in their approach. So in terms of what we wanted to do was we needed to make sure that in order to overcome anti-bullying for peer-on-peer or child-on-child abuse, one of the things that we needed to make sure that we did, and when I say overcome, I completely understand, and what we've already discussed today, is that we will continue to fight and make sure that we do not accept bullying, but we also understand that sometimes that happens, and we need to make sure that we approach whatever we need to do in the right way at that right time. So it was also to make sure that we could understand, not only by year group, but by key stage and by individuals. So we also needed to look at repeat offenders for students that were repeating any peer-on-peer abuse of a certain particular type of abuse as well. So we needed to obviously look at the hard data as well. So because of that, we needed to make sure that staff were able to identify and report those incidences appropriately. So what we decided to do was we set up on Sims a child on child abuse button, but then there was sort of drop downs for that so that staff could actually identify which part they were actually looking at, so that could be clicked onto. We also then had a further category added to CPOMs, so for anybody that was continuing and there was anything serious, that we were obviously dealing with that appropriately. All staff were aware and continue to be aware of our peer abuse policy, and that was obviously shared with all staff, and staff needed to make sure after the event they had a questionnaire to do with regards to that and some further information that they would need to hand back to us to make sure that staff really understood what they needed to do and what the expectation was. And then what we also have done is that all new staff, so as I say, this has been a continuation, that all new staff that arrive at our school, whether it's a newly qualified teacher or teachers that are on training, any new member of staff, and that isn't just our teaching staff, but new staff to our reception, our admin team. So any adult that is working alongside students understands exactly what the expectation is when it comes to child on child abuse. We just add the next slide on, please. So what the impact of that has been, and what I will say is that we are, we're a year on from that. So we did that training last November. And what I will say is that we are in a better position than we were back then, and we've still got work to do on that, because it's something that we've always got to make sure that we're looking at a particular area that needs some support, or particular students or staff members that may need that additional support. So we've analysed the data, as I say, and that's something that we do not only as incidents happen, but we also report on that half-termly and termly, so that we can actually understand if we've got repeated behaviours that sanctions also reflect that, and support that's in place for those. One thing that came out in terms of staff was confidence, that they understood that actually they weren't aware of the fact that that was something that they needed to report or that they needed to sanction. So that was really, really clear, and an expectation that we've continued. So, questionnaire showed that 100% of the staff felt more confident in reporting those incidents of peer-on-peer abuse, and 98% said that they knew how to report an incident. Just to make you aware that the 2% we obviously went back to and made sure that they understood what was expected of them. And 88% of staff felt that they were more comfortable in dealing with those sort of incidents and speaking to the individuals. But with regard to the members of staff that didn't, obviously is that one, they're signposted to the staff that feel more confident in doing that, maybe the pastoral staff or staff within the year groups or wherever that might be. But on top of that, that they've got that additional support of knowing and being given some additional confidence to support them with that. As I say, the training continues, and that's something that will continue during the course of this year, to make sure that we are meeting the needs of not only our staff, but of the students and what's going on with regards to that. The reports and the assessing of the data is obviously continuing as well, and it's something that I think has also been really, really powerful in the next step of knowing and understanding what we need as a school. If you don't mind just passing the next slide on, please. So staff have obviously been continued to be supported with this in order for it to be successful, and it's something that, as I think we've all talked about already, is something that is time consuming in some ways, in terms of the fact that it isn't something that is something that can happen overnight. And I think that with all of these things, you will always constantly be reviewing something and saying, well, actually, has that worked? No, it hasn't. Okay, what do we need to do next to meet the needs of where our school is at, or where a particular group is at, or whatever else? Staff absence has been an issue. So with regards to some staff that were working with regards to doing the assessment part and understanding where we needed students to be supported, that hasn't always been something we've been able to do straight away, because if we've had a learning mentor, say for instance off, who was working with a student to do some intensive support, if a member of staff is off, that obviously causes an impact on what our outcomes are, and that's something that last year was a real issue for us. This academic year, things have started well, but we have also increased our staff body to support that, especially within our pastoral teams. We've also got new signposts to support victims and aggressors. Actual, not only is it in-house work, but we're also working multi-agency with support, and that's to also support individuals that may not only are the victims, but also the aggressors, to support them. And also it's again supporting those aggressors with the next steps. Okay, if we just have the next slide, please. And then just finally, I just hope that's a whistle-stop tour, as I know it has been with everybody, but I think it's really important to understand where the need is, and for us, staff training was something that we will continue to do. I know some of you put in the chat about secondary school. We're obviously a very big secondary school. We're working with a school in Durham to support them with the anti-bullying programme this year, but if anybody wants any further information from me, if Jess or Liffey or myself, I'll put it in the chat, my email address, for anybody to get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to work and support with you all. So thank you very much.